The Young and the Restless Spoilers. The evening light filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hospital room. The sterile smell of antiseptic hung in the air, mingling with the quiet hum of medical equipment. Sharon lay on the bed, her once vibrant eyes now vacant, lost in a world only she could see. The weight of her illness had taken its toll, not just on her body, but on her mind as well. The doctors had tried to explain it, the numerous conditions that had ravaged her once healthy form, but none of it made sense to those who loved her. How had it come to this? How had Sharon, the strong and resilient woman they all knew, become a shell of her former self? Faith and Mariah sat huddled together in the corner of the room, their eyes red and swollen from crying. They had been by their mother's side for days, watching helplessly as she slipped further away from them. Sharon's illness had progressed rapidly, and now, the woman they loved seemed to be lost in a world of her own making. The worst part wasn't just the physical deterioration, but the terrifying hallucinations that had taken hold of her mind. Sharon would stare blankly at the ceiling, her lips moving in whispered conversations with people who weren't there. But it wasn't the strangers in her mind that haunted her. It was Cameron, the man who had once been a dark shadow in her past. Now, in her broken state, Sharon saw Cameron as a savior, figure of trust and obedience. She believed that he was the only one who cared for her, the only one who truly understood her. And as for her family, the people who had been by her side through thick and thin, she now saw them as enemies, threats to her safety and well-being. "She's not in her right mind," Mariah whispered, her voice trembling as she wiped away another tear. "This isn't Mom. Aunt B." Faith nodded, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as if holding on to something tangible could keep her from breaking apart. "Why is this happening to her, Mariah? What did she do to deserve this?" Mariah shook her head, unable to answer. There was no rhyme or reason to it, no logical explanation that could make sense of the madness. All they knew was that the woman lying in that hospital bed was no longer their mother, not in the way they had always known her. The doctors had done their best to assess Sharon's condition, but even they were baffled by the sudden onset of her symptoms. They had run test after test, scanning her brain for any signs of trauma or disease, but nothing definitive come back. All they could do was speculate. Perhaps it was a culmination of stress, past traumas resurfacing, or some undiagnosed neurological condition. But speculation wasn't enough. They needed answers, and fast. Sharon had been admitted to the hospital a week ago, after an episode at home that left The doctors had warned Faith and Mariah that Sharon might never fully recover her memory, that she might be lost in this state of confusion and delusion indefinitely. The thought of it was unbearable. How could they continue without their mother, without the woman who had been their rock, their guide through life? "Mom, please come back to us," Faith whispered, her voice breaking as she reached out to gently touch Sharon's hand. But there was no response, no flicker of recognition in Sharon's eyes. She was trapped in her own mind, unreachable, and alone. The door to the room opened quietly and Nick Newman stepped inside, his face drawn with exhaustion and worry. He had been there every day, juggling work and family, trying to keep everything together while his world crumbled around him. But nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing could prepare a parent for the possibility of losing the person they loved more than life itself. "How is she?" Nick asked, his voice rough with emotion as he approached the bed. Faith shook her head, unable to speak. Mariah looked up at her father, her eyes pleading for some kind of miracle, something that could bring their mother back from the brink. "She's the same," Mariah finally managed to say, her voice thick with tears. "She still doesn't recognize us. She still thinks Cameron is someone to trust." Nick's jaw tightened, his hands balling into fists at his sides. The mere mention of Cameron's name sent a surge of anger through him. Cameron had been a nightmare, a specter from the past who had caused nothing but pain and suffering. And now, in this twisted turn of events, he had somehow become a figure of comfort in Sharon's broken mind. "This isn't her," Nick said firmly, more to himself than to his daughters. "We have to believe that no matter what. This isn't Sharon, she's sick. She's still in there. We just have to find a way to reach her." But how? That was the question that none of them could answer. How do you bring someone back when their mind has turned against them, when they no longer remember who they are or the people who love them? The doctors had suggested more tests, more treatments, but Nick knew that Sharon couldn't endure much more. Her body was frail, weakened by the numerous illnesses that had ravaged her, and her mind was even more fragile. Every test, every procedure took something away from her, leaving her more lost, more disconnected from the world around her. "We need to do something," Faith said suddenly, her voice desperate. "We can't just sit here and watch her slip away." Nick nodded, his heart breaking at the sight of his daughter's pain. "I know, sweetheart. I know. But we have to be strong for her. Can't give up." But as the days passed, it became harder and harder to hold on to that hope. Sharon's condition remained the same, her memory a blank slate, her mind caught in the grip of delusions that